Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. This one is hopefully going to be a little bit more relaxed and kind of chilled out and stuff today because my head's a little fuzzy and all over the place. So I just thought I would bring you here with me to the floor of my spare room where I keep lots of books and stuff and spare bed, my cabinet of art supplies. What is this, like a flat tour? Today I thought we'd do something fun and lighthearted because in so many comments that I get and on a lot of the videos that I do, particularly critiquing poetry, it's all very negative and it's all about the bad poetry and what makes a poem terrible or awful or bad, and it kind of like sometimes makes me feel like, well, where's all the good poetry in the world? And a lot of you guys end up asking the same thing. So today I thought I would take you through a little kind of book tour of some of my favourite poetry books. I pick up this pile, but I also have this pile. I thought I'd take you through a little kind of mini tour of my favourite poetry books and ones I actually like and recommend, and kind of talk you through a little bit about what I like about them. And also, if you're new to poetry and want to kind of get into poetry and don't really know what to read or where to start, I want to kind of talk you through a few different bits and kind of maybe give you an idea of what to look for, what you might be interested in, that kind of thing. You'll have to forgive me if the setup is a little kind of janky today because I just kind of dragged my camera and a light in here and plopped myself down on the floor with my books, and my microphone's propped up on another book, just kind of ready to fall over and probably be hit at some point by accident. My phone battery's dead and charging it feels like a lot of effort at the minute, so I can't do my remote control filmy stuff, so if my focus is out, I'm sorry. Sorry for the lack of content recently as well. I know we want to get into poetry stuff, but I just feel like I'm just going to speak a while and kind of like get this out of my head. I've been very in my own head recently and I get like this sometimes, and it's been kind of tough and hard, and I've been struggling actually getting on camera. I've got all these ideas for videos that I'm trying to work on or want to work on or could work on, and just none of them are coming together like I want them to. And it's really difficult because some of them are videos that you guys have been asking for, and ones that I've been working on for such a long time now, and ones that are really research heavy. And I know there's a good video in there somewhere. I'm just struggling to make it work and actually get in front of a camera and film something that I think is good enough. And it's been a little bit stressful. I've got one video that's due to come out soon, which is reviewing Bo Burnham's poetry book Egghead. I don't know why I struggled to say that. Egghead. He's got a sponsor for that video, so I'm just waiting for them to okay it before I can publish it. That's like the one video I've mentioned the last week that's actually worked and turned out relatively okay. But I'll be honest again, the book was not so great, which really surprised me and saddened me quite a bit, so we're not going to be talking about that one today. Other than that, it's been a little bit difficult. Okay. Does anyone else get that thing right where you can love doing something and you get so much enjoyment out of it, but then the minute people expect you to do it, it becomes so difficult and you struggle with it? And it's not that you don't want to do it, it's that you suddenly have all this pressure on you to make it good and do it well, and it's stressful and it's hard and it's tiring. And that's how I kind of feel about some of the videos I want to make at the minute, including my like Fresh Poets Society stuff. Like, I love that so much, but it's like the more people ask like, when's it coming out, when's it coming out, when's it coming out, like the harder it is to make something that feels good enough, you know? Yeah, I don't know, I'm in my own head a bit, I'm sorry. Anyway, when I do get in my own head like this and when I get stressed, a really nice way for me to relax is I turn to poetry. Or sometimes if I just want to feel understood, I turn to poetry. If I want a distraction, I turn to poetry. Basically, whatever I need, poetry is there for me. And that's kind of what I want to share with you guys today. And hopefully, even just talking about something that I love so much like this, something that's very relaxing and just fun for me and that there's no real pressure around, I think is hopefully going to help like lift my mood a little bit as well. So this video is kind of therapy for me as much as it is hopefully some kind of entertainment for you. It's also worth noting this video is not planned. I just had a pile of books next to me and I'm just going to talk for a while and hopefully edit it into something vaguely coherent. So with that in mind, let's kind of jump in. The first thing I want to touch on is probably like the smallest category of books I have, if that makes sense. And that's something I just said before about how sometimes I use poetry to distract me. And for that, I have little collections like this, which is Poems of Fun and Fancy. This one is It's such a cute little book that I found in a secondhand bookshop in Greenwich when I lived in London, and I got it for £1, and I love this book because it reminds me how fun poetry and playing with language and grammar and how words sound and, you know, that kind of like whimsical element of poetry. It reminds me of all that and the fun of it, and that's why I kind of love this collection. It's got lots of kind of older poems in. A lot of them are completely anonymous because, you know, they're kind of like the original nursery rhymes or things like that, and then you have the more well-known ones, like you have, you know, The Owl and the Pussycat by Edward Lear. You've got plenty of stuff by Lewis Carroll. Actually, you've got plenty of Edward Lear in here as well, actually. You've even got Harburg's Lydia the Tattooed Lady, which is fantastic. But, oh my god, actually, if you guys haven't heard the Stornoway recording of that, I really recommend it. It's wonderful. But it's got absolutely all sorts in here, and there's so much that, like I say, it plays with language and how words sound, and they are just really fun, light poems. There's nothing all that, I guess, deep or serious in here, and sometimes that's what you want, you know, like Richard Corbett's nonsense poems, stuff like that, or, you know, Edward Lear's The Dong with a Luminous Nose, and there's a bunch of anonymous nonsense poems. There's everything in here. Ogden Nash's The Wendigo, all sorts. The descriptions are fantastic, you know, the Wendigo, its eyes are ice and indigo, its blood is rank and yellowish, its voice is hoarse and bellowish, and it goes on. And even though that one's like a little bit of a scary poem, I guess, compared to the others, you know, scary, it's not deep or creepy or serious. It's still got that fun rhyme scheme. It's got these amazingly vivid descriptions. It's got all these wonderful fantasy elements, and sometimes that's what you need in a poetry book. And this kind of book is one that I recommend for absolutely all ages. Pretty much everything in here is something that I would happily read to my niece or nephew, but at the same time, it's the kind of stuff that when you just kind of... This book is like a hug in poetry form, you know? That's the way I want to summarise that, you know? On the other hand, sometimes you want a giggle, but you want to be a little bit more grown up about it, and you want more observational humour than kind of silly humour, if that makes sense. And for times like that, I tend to turn to poets like Wendy for things like that, because she's really good at really relatable, sometimes slightly feminist, very English humour, and I really love her poems for that. I've spoken about her in other videos, and how, you know, she has poems that are like parodies of the Ladybird reading scheme books that I read when I was a kid, when I was learning to read. She has poems about guys, you know, husbands like coming home drunk from the pub late at night and trying to convince their wives they're sober and like being silly about it. Not in like a naggy or angry way, but in a kind of, oh, you know, a silly men kind of way. She's got poems about breaking up and falling in love, and she has poems about making friends and moving on and everything. And one of my favourite collections by her is Two Cures for Love, which is basically a selection of just some of her best work overall throughout her career. And there's a few poems in here that haven't been published in any other collections, so I really, really do recommend it. One of those ones that's not been published anywhere else is one that I have spoken about in another video. I think it might be the Bo Burnham one, actually. It's an attempt at an unrhymed verse, and basically it's a really good kind of giggle about poetry and its form, and, you know, trying to stick to conventions and trying to break conventions, and, you know, accidentally doing what you don't mean to, and it's a good giggle about the kind of artistic writing process in general. But all in all, I love her kind of observational humour. And that's not to say that all of her poems are funny. Some of them are sad, some of them are very heartfelt, some of them are just nice, you know? And for that reason, I can't recommend her enough. But I always know if I want a giggle or a bit of a cheer up, Wendy Cope is always going to be there for me. I always know the poems to turn to. Sometimes, though, you have lots of feelings and you don't necessarily know what poem you need to get it out, to get out of it. I'm sorry, I'm stirring a bit. You don't always know what poem you need to get out of whatever mood you're in, or sometimes it's hard to identify what mood you're in, but I can almost guarantee there is always going to be a poem to help you understand how you're feeling, or to help you get out of how you're feeling, or support you, or encourage you in how you're feeling. And for those times when I don't necessarily have a particular poem or poet in mind, I turn to this little collection of books right here. And amongst this, you have The Poetry Pharmacy by William C. Sharp. I hope that's how you say his name. Well, he edited this collection. These are all anthologies. So you have The Poetry Pharmacy and The Poetry Pharmacy Returns, which are two absolutely fantastic collections I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute. And then in a similar vein, I have The Emergency Poet, which is an anthology edited by Deborah Almer. And these ones, which I don't actually know the name of the editor, but you have Poems for a World Gone to Poop, and Poems to Fix a Fudged Up World, we will say. But all of these are absolutely fantastic collections that arrange the poems by feeling or circumstance or whatever. So take The Poetry Pharmacy, for example, because this was one of the first books I ever discovered that does this. And this is actually one of the books that me and my friend Carrie Ann bonded over when we realised that we both loved poetry so much. And it's fantastic because it goes through and it gives you a series of, I guess, overall topics. So mental and emotional well-being, motivations, self-image and self-acceptance, the world and other people, love and loss. And then within that, it gives you, I guess, condition. Yeah, he calls them conditions. And they're very, specific things. So here you go. As an example, something that I think a lot of people relate to. Within the motivations category, the condition could be lack of courage, right? And it's, that feeling when you need to do something, or you want to do something, and you're too scared to do it, and you don't quite have that courage and that motivation to push yourself to do it. Kind of like me recording videos this last week. So you turn to that point, and it gives you a little description and a poem. And so for this one, the poem that it recommends is Come to the Edge by Christopher, I think it's Loge, something like that. And it says this poem's also suitable for fear, lack of confidence, and lack of conviction. And it gives you a nice little kind of story behind why he chose this poem for this condition and so on. And he says things like, I often prescribe this poem to people who have lost their confidence and, like the Cowardly Lion in The Wizard of Oz, are in need of encouragement. It shows how a leap into the unknown, whether it's a bungee jump or a marriage proposal, can lead to joy, not disaster. So the poem it recommends for this is a very, very simple one that's just kind of lovely and a little inspiring. Come to the edge, we might fall. Come to the edge, it's too high. Come to the edge. And they came, and he pushed, and they flew. And the poem itself, along with, there's always a long kind of chunky page of description that goes along with it. And I just find I always find what I need in these books, and that's always really, really useful. So another condition, for example, might be, making mistakes. And the poem it recommends is The Mistake by James Fenton. Or for obsessive love, you have The Fist by Derek Walcott. For false expectations in love, you have one of my favourite poems ever, Defining the Problem by Wendy Cope. And it's fantastic. The Poetry Pharmacy Returns, the second book, goes on to a whole different set of conditions and topics and things like that. So you have hesitation and choice, strength and healing, silver linings, hearth and home, conflict and reconciliation, and being numerous, which I was like, what the hell does that even mean? But the conditions within that are things like not knowing who one is, feeling isolated, facing disaster, political apathy, judging others, need for kindness and stuff like that. And I actually think I prefer the second collection a little more than the first. No, I don't know actually. The first one is fantastic. There's a lot of poems in here that I absolutely love. They're both really good. I couldn't recommend one over the other. Just maybe if you're looking for poems on a certain theme, you might pick one over the other. It depends what's going on with you in your life and what you're looking for, But in this one, again, you have these absolutely fantastic poems. So for the condition of having an existential crisis, you have Primary Wonder by Denise Leverton. Of course, Fear of Mortality, When Death Comes by Mary Oliver. Fantastic poem. And the great thing is about these books is that I always find tons of poets that I've never heard of before. People like Don Patterson I'd never heard of before I got this book, and now I really like his poetry. This is how I was introduced to poets like Nikita Gill. Who else? Pablo Neruda I already knew. Joseph Miller was a new one. I haven't looked into any of his other stuff yet. But yeah, there's absolutely tons of stuff in these, and it's wonderful. In these two collections, the ones about poems to fix a fudged up world and poems for a world gone to poop, these are ones that are a little more general in their kind of grouping of poetry. So in this one you have poems split into ones about work, about adventure, wisdom, love, rest, and purpose. Whereas in this one, you have it split into categories of what the F, get me the F out of here, keep your poop together, let's do something about this poop, and life is still effing beautiful. So the kind of grouping of poems, and there's probably, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 poems in each category, if not more or less, I'm not sure. Numbers aren't my strong point. But these are absolutely fantastic. I find the poetry pharmacy ones have slightly more modern and contemporary poets and poems in there, whereas these ones have both contemporary and some of the older ones. So in these you will get a bit of stuff like Shakespeare and so on, and William Blake and Wordsworth and that sort of thing, Percy Shelley, you know. These ones are kind of more classic poems arranged into topics for the modern world, if that makes sense, and I kind of like that. The Emergency Poet is very similar to the Poetry Pharmacy in that, you know, these are kind of poems for, it calls itself an anti-stress poetry anthology, and so it splits them into categories like Carpe Diem, Now I Become Myself, Love, Getting Older, Be Alive Every Minute of Your Life, Talking to Grief, Courage and Inspiration, Hope, and Tonics to Lift the Spirits. But rather than giving one poem for each condition like the Poetry Pharmacy does, and getting very specific with the conditions, it kind of keeps the groupings very vague like these ones. And again, there's a real mix of kind of older and newer poems in this one, although I would say they're slightly older in general in here. So you have got things like, you've got people like Emily Bronte and T.S. Eliot. Who else have we got? We've got some anonymous ones, Emily Dickinson, and so on. Christina Rossetti, you know, a little bit of everything. There's lots of good stuff in here. On the other hand, if you're looking for an anthology where you do kind of know what mood you're in and what you're looking for, 2 in particular I really recommend are She Is Fierce and Penguin's Poems for Love. 2 very different anthologies, but I recommend them both and kind of just wanted to chat about them both a little bit. She Is Fierce is one that I think I have spoken about in videos before. It's edited by Emma Sampson, and this is probably my favourite feminist poetry collection, along with, I've only got the ebook, not the physical copy. I think it's called Women of Resistance. That's a fantastic collection as well. But She Is Fierce is basically described as brave, bold, and beautiful poems by women. And it's very much, you know, by women for women. And it talks a lot about, I guess, the female experience and a lot of feminism, a lot of what it's like to be a woman, especially in quite a patriarchal world. So again, they're split up into categories within this. For example, roots and growing up, friendship, love, mindfulness and joy, nature, society, fashion and body image, where I found some poems that really, really spoke to me and kind of really made me consider a new perspective on things. And, oh, actually, no, my favourite category in this is the courage, protest and resistance one. It's, yeah, there's some fantastic stuff in here. And finally, endings. Again, these are more contemporary poets and poems, and you've got absolutely like legends in here like Alice Walker and Maya Angelou and all kinds of people like that. Again, Nikita Gill, this is when I first kind of discovered some of her stuff as well. Yeah, it covers everything in here, from just kind of personal insecurities and confidence and self-discovery to kind of broader political and social issues to kind of like intersectional feminist issues about race and politics and everything, and it's absolutely fascinating. I think the last time I mentioned this book in a video, someone kind of called me out and said something about how, I can't remember exactly what the critique was, something about how I shouldn't use the word women, or I shouldn't use the term female or something, because it basically whatever it was, they didn't like it because they thought I was excluding transgender women, and I never meant to. Like, this is something that, the experiences in here are something that I think all women will relate to. Whether you're cis or transgender, it doesn't matter, you're still a woman. Like, everyone's going to be able to relate to at least some of it. But at the same time, this is something that men will be able to read and enjoy as well, and it'll give them a new perspective. I actually recommended this to a guy friend of mine, and he absolutely loves it. And, you know, non-binary people as well are going to get a hell of a lot out of it. Because, you know, things like, just take, for example, you know, the poems in here about society, fashion and body image. You know, while this might be women writing, and someone like, let's say Lucille Clifton in Homage to My Hips, you know, talks about kind of her hips, her bum, her curves, that kind of thing. even though that's a woman talking about her very kind of like typically feminine body and kind of saying what she both hates and loves about it, we all have something about ourselves and our body that makes us feel that way, whether you're man, woman, or non-binary. Everyone has those feelings about their body, and therefore I think no matter who you are, there's something in this book you can get something out of. And I think, yeah, I think it's fantastic. I love this collection. I don't know if I'm rambling now, I'm sorry. One of my newer anthologies that I've just got, and I haven't even had a chance to properly go through yet, is Poems for Love. It's the Penguin one. It was edited by Laura Barber, and this is fantastic. Love is one of those topics that is kind of a little bit synonymous with poetry, you know? People think that a lot of the time poetry has to be romantic and sentimental and so on, but there's so much more to love than that. But it is such a central part of human life that, you know, it can't help being translated into art. And this book kind of shows, I guess, love in all its forms, you know? It's really sweet. So the kind of chapter or section titles are kind of responses to the question of how do I love thee. And so you have sections like suddenly, secretly, tentatively, from a distance, with a vow, impatiently, incurably, passionately, truly, madly, deeply, and then towards the end, regretfully, fatally, after death and eternally. And so you kind of have everything covered in here through poetry. And again, you have some older stuff, but also some more modern and contemporary stuff as well. There's a real nice mix in here. But I would say it's probably predominantly slightly more older classic stuff, but not in a way that it's intimidating or unrelatable, you know? It's all very, very relatable. And, you know, a lot of the way the book's structured is kind of, you know, from those first moments of seeing someone and feeling those first flutters of excitement and passion, to developing a relationship, to full-on love, to love lost and love regretted, love missed, and eternal love. Even, you know, the kind of love that's so strong that even death and being apart can't stop it. Literally kind of everything's covered in here, and I think it's wonderful. Speaking of love as well, there is another anthology that I like that's just like a really nice little one. It's called Love Found. It's 50 poems in here, and it's edited by Jessica Strand and Leslie Jonath, and it's got these beautiful illustrations in it by Jennifer Orkin Lewis, and the style of illustration is absolutely lovely. It's adorable. I think if you were looking to get a poetry book for someone that you care about, someone, you know, maybe someone that you love, this might be a nice little choice to get them. I think it would make a great gift. Again, this is split up into different sections, so you have, it opens with desire and longing, and then goes into heartbreak and loss, and then ends with passion and partnership. I like the real mix in here as well. You've got, again, a few more kind of like older and classic poems, but on the whole, I do find these a little more contemporary and relatable, and they're very, very accessible ones. You know, even the more slightly classic ones by like Percy Shelley and T.S. Eliot and so on. Some of them I like as well because they're not afraid to have a bit of a sense of humour in here, you know? Like this silly one by Ogden Nash, which is a word to husbands. To keep your marriage brimming with love in the loving cup. Whenever you're wrong, admit it. Whenever you're right, shut up. It's so silly. But then again, you've also got the really sweet and heartfelt ones that are just absolutely lovely, you know, like Anne Bradstreet's To My Dear and Loving Husband. If ever two were one, then surely we. If ever man were loved by wife, then thee. If ever wife was happy in a man, compare with me, ye women, if you can. Apprize thy love more than whole mines of gold, or all the riches that the east doth hold. My love is such that rivers cannot quench, nor aught but love from thee give recompense. Thy love is such I can no way repay. The heavens reward thee manifold, I pray. Now while we live, in love let's so persevere, that when we live no more, we may live ever. Once you've established some poets that you like, I think it can be a really good idea to go out and buy poetry collections by your favourite poets. So for me, you already know I've got the Wendy Cope one over there. I also have John Donne's Selected Poets, Oscar Wilde, who you know I'm a huge, huge fan of, Kate Bass's one and only collection, The Pasta Maker, Caroline Duffy's The World's Wife, although another favourite collection of hers is Rapture. And then for Simon Armitage, I have Book of Matches, which was possibly the first ever poetry book I bought myself for fun. Paper Aeroplane, which is kind of his best of, and Grace Nichols' The Fat Black Woman's Poems, which it's really sweet inside. Got it signed by Grace Nichols because I met her at a poetry reading in Manchester, which was wonderful. God, October 2010 that was. When Black is Red. That was an incredible night. That was absolutely wonderful. I had a great time. That was a night when I first kind of got Grace Nichols' poetry. Before, I kind of read this stuff and I was like, yeah, alright, it's okay, but I don't really get it. Like, it was seeing her there and hearing her read her poems out loud, hearing that rhythm and that passion in her voice, in her words, hearing that very distinct voice of hers. It made me see her poetry in a whole new light. I really kind of engaged with it so much that night, and with other poets as well who were there. But with Grace Nichols in particular, I was like, I finally get it now. And since then, I've read all her poems in a completely new light and really, really enjoyed them. Wilde's poetry tends to be quite flowery, and so I never really sit down and read his poetry without a pen to annotate. Don't know if you can kind of see this stuff, but I have like, where are we? I have like notes scribbled all over my pages in here, especially with like some of my favourite poems and stuff, so you should see what I've done to the classics, you know, like Ballad of Reading Gaol and so on. I love Oscar Wilde's poetry. It might be a little more intimidating for some, because especially some of his earlier stuff that definitely has a lot of references to, I want to say like Greek mythology and stuff, and just Greek classic stuff in general. I get that can be very kind of intimidating for a lot of people. Once you kind of get past that and you start to kind of like get used to his style and some of his references. And this again, I'd suggest just having like your phone with you or something nearby, so if you come across a word or a name that you don't recognise, just give it a little Google, add a little annotation, and it can be so enjoyable. Wilde's poetry is beautiful. He has such a sense of rhythm. He has such wonderful, beautiful imagery. He's fantastic. I do actually think, it might be a little cliche, but if you want to get into, say, like Oscar Wilde's poetry, start with the Ballad of Reading Gaol. Like, I don't doubt you'll have definitely heard a few lines from it before, but it is just a wonderful, beautiful work that he wrote after he was in prison in Reading Gaol, you know. Like, there's definitely bits that I think people will recognise, like, I never saw a man who looked with such a wistful eye upon that little tent of blue which prisoners call the sky, at every drifting cloud that went with sails of silver by. Yet each man kills the thing he loves, by each let this be heard. Some do it with a bitter look, some with a flattering word. The coward does it with a kiss, the brave man with a sword. Some kill their love when they are young, and some when they are old. Some strangle with the hands of lust, some with the hands of gold. The kindest use a knife, because the dead so soon grow cold. It's a wonderful poem with all these beautiful, beautiful images and descriptions, but also a fascinating narrative as well that really gives you a hell of a lot to think about. He has certain bits repeated throughout as well, and you'll start to notice kind of where these bits are repeated and why, and the significance of that. This is a really, really good poem for kind of starting to analyse. This is a really great poem to start with if you're looking for something to kind of analyse deeply that isn't too, I guess, complicated or intimidating, but that has a hell of a lot in it, you know? It definitely gives you a hell of a lot to think about justice in general, how we treat people and prisoners, about life, death, freedom, and, you know, prisons, both mental and societal and physical. There's so much in this poem, it's absolutely wonderful. Wilde is the poetry that I turn to when I want something a little deeper, something that I know I can really kind of invest in and sit with and think about and kind of very actively read. So if you just want something light-hearted, I maybe wouldn't recommend it for you, but if you are looking for something, like I say, to be a little bit more of an active reader with, I cannot recommend Oscar Wilde enough. He's wonderful. For the more accessible stuff, definitely go for someone like Caroline Duffy. She's, you know, got poetry for everyone on every kind of topic. Kate Bass is fantastic as well, if you want. So it's a very, very short collection that she's done, but it's very, very well written, and it contains poems like The Albatross, which is one I spoke about over on Instagram at one point. It's a fantastic, fantastic poem, and we had a little analyse over there. she talks a lot about kind of family life and relationships and having children, and both the negative sides of that and the positive. But it's just a kind of very real, very unpretentious collection, which I like. It's very relatable, even for someone like me who is single without children, you know? Finally, a little collection that I do have is this one that I bought recently, because I don't know if you guys know, but I've recently moved back to Yorkshire. I'm from South Yorkshire, but I recently moved to West Yorkshire after being in London for about 4 years. This is my first time back in Yorkshire for about 10 years, and it took a lot to get me back here, and it was kind of terrifying coming back because there's a lot of history here and stuff, and yeah, it was difficult. But now that I am back, I'm trying to kind of reclaim a little bit of power in my roots, if that makes sense. I don't want to be ashamed of coming from here anymore just because the people that I grew up with weren't nice. I don't want them to be my representation of Yorkshire for my entire life. I want to try and make something better of it, which is why I'm kind of looking at things like, well, I got this. This is the Valley Press Anthology of Yorkshire Poetry, and it's a lovely little collection all about different places in Yorkshire. And some of them are funny, some of them show how grim and rough Yorkshire can be. Some of them show that Yorkshire's actually a pretty decent place. It's not so bad, you know? There's a really funny poem by Miles Salter called Hull is the Shakespearean Tragedy. And I've recently ventured to Hull for the first time because I've got a friend over there now. And, yeah. I can see why it's that rough. There's another one just called Hull as well by Peter Knaggs, and it's... oh god, it shows that roughness that Hull has. Some of them do a fantastic job of capturing the kind of Yorkshire accent and Yorkshire spirit, and that kind of like not taking any crap from anybody vibe, whether that's a good thing or not. A lot of people are proud when they're from Yorkshire that they don't take crap from anybody, and you know, we tell it like it is, no nonsense around here. But it's not always a good thing. I think a lot of the times it leads people to being insensitive and intolerant. Honestly, so many rude, intolerant people in Yorkshire that I've experienced, and this book kind of highlights both the best and the worst of it, and so I'm finding it very kind of relatable and eye-opening, you know? Then again, some bits just make me laugh, you know? Like the opening poem in here is one by Dave Goff called A Yorkshire Alphabet. It basically goes through all kinds of, you know, typical Yorkshire words and Yorkshire-related things, and it's got lots of Yorkshire place names. It's got lots of Yorkshire slang in here, you know, like for N, the line is near lad, now. It's such a Yorkshire thing, you know. Near lad meaning no, like boy, mate, stop, don't do that, you know. And note meaning nothing, but it's such a Yorkshire thing. Like, you even see it on the bins round here. Like, the recycling bins will be like, no but paper, you know, and it literally says note on it. It's such a Yorkshire thing. And for E, you've got A up, A up, A up, because A up is the thing that Yorkshire people say to each other instead of hello, you know? For O, you've got awkward, 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 meaning awkward, because people don't pronounce it like awkward. They pronounce it as awkward with an O, you know? And then at the end... it's fantastic, because it's like, X is what I put on my pool coupon every week. Yokel's Yorkers and Yorkshire Evening Post. Z. Now what bloody use is that, eh? We eat fish and chips up here, not pizza. And there's no Z in Barnsley, is there? Think on then. And it just makes me laugh, because you know, there's no Z in Barnsley. Like, Barnsley's where I'm from, Barnsley's where I grew up. Even though it's spelt with an S, we do kind of pronounce it Barnsley, you know? I can see it. I don't know. I don't know if this is the kind of humour that anyone else would relate to if you're not from Yorkshire or if you haven't lived here. That's kind of why I do want to make a video on this, I think. This little collection and this poetry, and talk a little bit about how I feel about it and how it makes me feel and how I relate to it and what I like, and honestly some of the kind of like emotions it stirs up from my childhood and growing up, and well, not really my childhood, more my teen years. It was tough. Plenty of poems about Sheffield, which again is basically where I grew up. Anyway, sorry, I've rambled enough. I've spoken a fair amount. I don't know if this was interesting or educational, but I hope it was, at least a little bit. Anyway, I just figured I would end this by reading you one last poem, or maybe two, I don't know. The last one I want to read here is The Journey by Mary Oliver. I love Mary Oliver's poems, especially her collection Dog Songs, which is about dogs. So obviously I love it. This one is one you'll find in the Poetry Pharmacy returns for the condition Need for Self-Care. And so it's one that I think I might need to read right now, I might need to hear, and one which I think sometimes other people need to hear as well. This is Journey. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began. Though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble, and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones, but little by little, as you left their voices behind, and the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. Actually, you know what, screw it, we're going to end on one more, because I want a kind of nice happy note, and Maya Angelou is an absolute legend, and she has this wonderful poem called Phenomenal Women, which again you'll find in the Poetry Pharmacy, not the Poetry Pharmacy returns like last time, but this is the Poetry Pharmacy, for the condition Insecurity. It's such an uplifting, inspiring poem. If I could aspire to have even, you know, a tenth of this amount of confidence one day, I think I'd be unstoppable, you know? Phenomenal Woman by Maya Angelou. Pretty women wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model size, but when I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say, it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me. I walk into a room just as cool as you please, and to a man, the fellows stand or fall down on their knees. They swarm around me, a hive of honeybees. I say, it's the fire in my eyes and the flash of my teeth, the swing in my waist and the joy in my feet. I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me. Men themselves have wondered what they see in me. They try so much, but they can't touch my inner mystery. When I try to show them, they say they still can't see. I say, it's in the arch of my back, the sun of my smile, the ride of my breasts, the grace of my style. I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me. Now you understand just why my head's not bowed. I don't shout or jump about or have to talk real loud. When you see me passing, it ought to make you proud. I say, it's in the click of my heels, the bend of my hair, the palm of my hand, the need for my care. 'Cause I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me. I adore her so much. She's so wonderful. Seriously. I love this. So what William Seychart writes at the end of this little passage about this poem is, this is a poem I would advise absolutely anyone to read before a party. It can inject self-belief like a shot of adrenaline. Whether you want to be a phenomenal woman, a phenomenal man, or just a phenomenal person, Angelou has something to teach you. It's all within your grasp. Her head's not bowed, and yours doesn't need to be either. And that's kind of what I love about poetry. There's something for everyone. There's something for every mood, every occasion. There's something for whatever you need, and that's why I love it. And that's why I'm always going to keep talking about it. And that's why these books are probably some of the most precious things I own, you know, other than Kyra and my stuffed animals. I love her. And my boys. But yeah, anyway, I do feel a little better now. I'm still a little kind of shaky and off, and my head's still kind of foggy and all over the place, but I hope this was a nice relaxed video, and I hope you got something out of it. And thank you so much for watching me today, watching this, for sticking with me, for being patient while I'm sorting my head out a bit, and yeah, thank you for sticking around. I appreciate it a lot. Let me know down in the comments if you have any favourite poems or poetry books or poetry collections and anthologies Let me know if you have a favourite poet. Let me know if you've read any of these books that I mentioned today. If you do want a full, complete list of them, I'll leave them down in the description below, and there'll be some links to where you can get them from Amazon as well. They will be affiliate links if that's okay, which means that if you buy any of them, it just helps support my channel a little bit as well. Absolutely no pressure to use them if you don't want to. If you just want to see the names of the books and the list of them, I will pop them down there as well. Yeah, but for now, that is about me done for today, I think. I think I just need to go and cuddle Kyra and rest for a while and kind of sort my head out a bit more. But yeah, thank you for watching. Hopefully I'll be back to kind of regular videos soon and feeling myself again a bit soon. But yeah, I'm saying a lot and but and I'm gonna go to bed now. Thank you for watching so much, and see you again soon.